Have you ever been pushed so far, so relentlessly, that the only option left is to build a fortress around yourself? Not of stone, but of rules, of logic, of pure, unassailable reason. What happens when that fortress is tested by a force of nature, a hurricane of teenage entitlement and parental arrogance? Well, you're about to find out. This isn't just a story about a teacher and some difficult students. This is a story about a meticulously crafted plan, a masterclass in psychological warfare, and the day 7 lazy, manipulative seniors learned that some lines should never, ever be crossed. If you believe that justice, true justice, is a dish best served cold, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and get ready, because we're about to dive deep into a story of epic revenge, where the seeds of destruction were sown not by the teacher, but by the very students who thought they were untouchable. Let's get into it. To understand the genius of what's to come, you have to understand the crucible that forged the teacher at the heart of our story. Imagine this, your first year of teaching. You're bright-eyed, full of passion, ready to mold young minds. But you're not in a leafy suburb with picket fences. You're in a tough area, where respect is a currency you haven't earned yet. Every single day was a battle. Not a week went by without a parent demanding his job, a student undermining his authority, or someone just flat out calling him a piece of shit. The verbal and emotional abuse was a relentless storm that left him questioning everything. He nearly quit halfway through the first semester. He was accused of racism for simply asking a student to stop talking. He was torn apart for giving a failing grade to a student who hadn't turned in any work. He was even reprimanded by his own principal for enforcing the rules in the student handbook. "You need to let more rules slide," the principal told him, tired of the constant parent complaints. "You're being a negative influence on the school." Parents would show up unannounced, sitting in the back of his classroom like vultures, just waiting to tell him he was a shitty educator, a bad human being. The horror stories from that school could fill a book, but they all taught him one crucial lesson: to survive, to actually do the one job that mattered. Teaching kids, he had to become untouchable. So, he moved to a new school, in a different world. This was an affluent area, where the parents didn't just have money, they had millions. This brought its own set of challenges, but it also brought a new principal, a supportive leader who understood the game. His philosophy was simple: follow the school's handbook to the letter. Every rule, every policy, was a shield. The school had learned the hard way that caving to parent demands was like spilling blood in the water. It only brought more sharks. And in this new environment, our teacher thrived. He became a master of preparation, anticipating and deflecting 99% of parent complaints before they could even form. The few times a parent tried to attack him, he didn't just defend himself. He ripped back, armed with the undeniable logic of the school's own policies. He developed a reputation. The kids and parents knew, you don't mess with Mr. Fighterjet. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't out to destroy kids. He just wanted them to be accountable. Sometimes, that meant letting them fail. He had parents in tears because their child could no longer skate by with an A. But for the students who tried, who genuinely put in the effort, he was their greatest ally. His classroom became a sanctuary of learning and fun, built on a foundation of ironclad rules. Each year, he'd refine them, patching up any loophole a student or parent might try to exploit. He wasn't waiting to be ambushed anymore. He was in control, and that's when the fun really began. The year this legendary story takes place, our teacher had a mixed-grade high school class, an elective that still counted as a core requirement. His first rule of the year was a simple one: a preemptive strike against the laziest of questions. I never want to hear "when will we ever need this?" because you didn't have to sign up for this class. His entire teaching philosophy was built around student accountability. His class was designed to offer something for everyone. If you tried your best, you were guaranteed a C. If you worked hard, a B or an A was well within your reach. He would bend over backwards for any student who showed even a sliver of genuine effort. A student struggling with an assignment but showing progress? Turn it in tomorrow for full credit, he'd say. This is how hard work pays off. But if you decided to screw around in his class, He had already built a labyrinth of documentation and data to dismantle any pathetic excuse you could possibly cook up. He was the teacher who would stay for 90 minutes after school to help you, to fix your project for another class, or even to just listen as you cried about your parents' divorce. But if he saw you goofing off, he'd warn you, email your parents, and then, if they didn't care, he'd let you dig your own grave. He'd watch you shovel the dirt deeper and deeper until you were hip deep in your own failure, begging for a ladder. And then, he'd toss you a rope. Not a ladder, a rope. You could still climb out, if you tried hard enough. But most kids would just cry until the hole caved in and buried them. He was a master of the school's online grading system. He could see when a student looked at an assignment, how long they spent on it, and if they were plagiarizing. This data was his sword and his shield. At parent-teacher conferences, he could say, with undeniable proof, "Of course the test was hard. Your child didn't even open the 9 homework assignments until 11 o'clock the night before." He made it impossible for the blame to be laid at his feet. The result, the worst kids, the professional slackers, actively avoided his class. It was a beautiful, self-regulating system. But this year, something was different. The cyclical nature of his reputation, praised one year, shit-talked the next, had brought him a perfect storm. Not just a wave of knuckleheads, but a tsunami. And these knuckleheads came with parents who didn't just complain, they loved to make trouble. He'd already heard the whispers in the staff lounge. These were the parents who name-dropped lawyers, who bullied teachers into giving extra credit, who flat-out denied their child's wrongdoing even when presented with irrefutable proof. These were the parents who, when their kid was caught cheating, would accuse the teacher of making the class too hard, thus justifying the cheating in the first place. The knuckleheads themselves were a group of 7 senior boys, a clique of laziness and arrogance, who had all rearranged their schedules to be in the same class period. The other teachers looked at him with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. How are you going to deal with them? They'd ask in the staff lounge. But for the most part, he had it under control. He actually got along with them, in a strange way. They had mastered the art of appearing busy while doing absolutely nothing. And at least they didn't distract the other kids. Then came the first group project. His class size was perfect for 7 groups of 4. The idiot collective, as he called them, formed 2 groups, pulling in an unsuspecting kid who had been absent. The result was a spectacular crash and burn. They had goofed off during every single class period, put off a 2-week assignment until the weekend before, and then dumped the work on each other, resulting in a project that was barely started, let alone finished. He handed out the failing grades. And the storm broke. The parent-teacher conferences began. Each one was a carbon copy of the last. "My kid did all the work," they'd say. "He doesn't deserve a bad grade." Our teacher, calm and prepared, would slide a copy of the student's work across the table. "Here is what your student turned in," he'd say. Then he'd slide over another document. "And here is my hyper-specific rubric, which I printed out and emailed to your student the day the project started. As you can see, I've itemized the grading for ease of use. I'd be happy to go over the grade your student earned." The parent would read the evidence, their face tightening, and then turn to their child. "Where are the missing parts?" The student would stammer. "My group members were supposed to do that. I can't grade what I never received," the teacher would say with a calm, final tone. "I can't reasonably raise your kid's grade. Sorry." He would then offer a glimmer of hope. His assignments were weighted to become more valuable throughout the semester. A single failure, even a big one, could be overcome. Their precious angel could still get an A. The parents would leave, disgruntled but appeased. The fallout from these meetings was predictable. Since it clearly wasn't the teacher's fault, he had the data, the emails, the proof, it had to be the other kid's fault. So, the parents of the 7 seniors all laid down a new law. Their perfect child was no longer allowed to work with their previous group mates. And so, the cancer spread. These 7 lazy seniors, now broken up, began to metastasize throughout the rest of the class. For every new group project, they were like cancerous ping-pong balls, bouncing from one healthy group to another, wreaking havoc. Our teacher, ever the strategist, had a defense mechanism in place. The group contract. For every project, each group had to write and sign a contract, detailing who was responsible for what, and when it was due. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a legal document, a tool of surgical precision. It gave him the power to dismiss a lazy group member and give them a 0 without the parent being able to say a single word. But the other students were afraid. They didn't want to use the contract. They feared retribution from the seniors. So, they suffered in silence. Parents of the hardworking kids would call, complaining that their child was doing all the work while a senior slacked off. He'd tell them, "I would love to yank that leech out of your kid's grade pool, but they have to use the contract." The seniors were masters of manipulation. The day before a new group project was announced, they would strategically sit at different tables, ingratiating themselves with the hard-working students, buying them lunch, bringing them gifts, pulling the "I'm already here, let's be in a group" card, and it worked. Every group had at least one coddled child to deal with. The class morale was tanking. But our teacher was biding his time. He was playing the long game. The other students were gobbling up every extra credit opportunity to cushion their grades, and parent complaints were a non-issue. He was following policy. His principal had a copy of his syllabus, ready to quote the rules that the parents had signed off on at the beginning of the year. "I don't read that shit, so it doesn't apply," a parent might say. "The clause above your signature," the principal would calmly reply, "states that you have read the document in its entirety and agree to abide by all the rules." Perhaps this is a lesson for both you and your student about reading the fine print. This was his fortress, and inside it he was planning. Of the 7 slothful seniors, 3 were the ringleaders, the ones whose parents had a particular taste for making trouble. We'll call them Larry, Curly, and Mo. These were the parents who, he imagined, sat around in a smoke-filled room with cigars and cognac, laughing about how they had once again bent a lowly teacher to their will. He knew that any move he made would be scrutinized, and he refused to be the topic of their next celebratory circle jerk. A special note about Larry. He had recently turned 18, and his parents, now traveling non-stop, had completely checked out. Larry was no longer just lazy. He was a douchebag, untethered from any parental consequence. Our teacher began to monitor their grades, not just in his class, but in all of them. This wasn't spying, it was due diligence. He needed to know if the problem was his class, or if it was the students themselves. He was tired of hearing, "But they have A's in their other classes," thanks to kids faking their grades with the Inspect Element tool on their web browser. He spoke with their other teachers. The picture became chillingly clear. These boys were doing the absolute bare minimum in every class. He discovered that Larry was the mastermind, finding ways to get other kids to do his work, and then disseminating it among his friends. Other teachers had been bullied into lowering the weight of their tests, allowing these boys to float by with B's, their failing exam scores cushioned by inflated homework and project grades. He couldn't prove it. They were using Snapchat, but he knew. In his class, their only strategy was to leech off of others. The good kids were too scared to use the group contract, and the seniors were maintaining C's and B's without lifting a finger. And then, one random day in class, he planted the seed. "Hey everybody," he said, his tone casual. "I was looking at the schedule, and I realized that your last project before finals might stress you out. Would anyone mind if I dropped it?" A wave of relief washed over the room. The students, tired of being dragged down by the seniors, erupted in cheers. "Yes. Drop it. You're the best teacher ever." "Okay," he said with a smile. "But just so you know, that means I'm going to move our next project back a couple of weeks and extend the deadline. And since I'm canceling the last one, this next project will now be worth roughly 20% of your final grade, so do your best. Screwing this up could kill your grade." The class just shrugged. "Whatever." He sent out an email to all the parents and students, informing them of the change. He received nothing but praise for removing stress from the end of the semester. He had a legitimate reason for the change. 2. Another teacher had dropped a massive project right before finals, and he didn't want his students to burn out. It was a win-win. But the real reason he moved the project, he had discovered something. A piece of information that would change everything. Senior Ditch Day. The school didn't condone it, but it was an open secret. And he found out the date a month in advance. The Friday before the new high-stakes project was set to begin, he stood before his class. A wicked, knowing grin played on his lips. "Okay, everyone," he announced just as the bell rang. "I'm introducing the project now, so you can get into your groups today, and we can start first thing Monday morning without delay. This project is too important to waste any time." The room was filled with shit-eating grins. Because on this particular Friday, on Senior Ditch Day, all 7 of his knuckleheads were absent. He had just given the entire class their freedom. Instantly, the room buzzed with energy. Groups formed, alliances were solidified. The dead weight was gone. And even better, a few students had transferred out of his class at the semester break. The numbers were now perfect. The 7 seniors would have no choice but to work together, in 2 separate groups of misery. Before the end of the day, he sent out another email, a carefully worded notification to all parents and students. The project had begun. Any absent students needed to contact their classmates to establish groups before Monday morning. This email, this single piece of digital communication, was the linchpin of his entire plan. I'm sure you can guess what happened next. The following Monday, the 7 seniors came traipsing into class just seconds before the bell. Cocky and oblivious, they looked around, noticing the only empty seats were at 2 tables, pushed together in the corner. Whatever, they took their seats. "Okay," the teacher said after taking attendance. "Everybody has a copy of the rubric. Go ahead and get started." The rest of the class immediately began working. The seniors looked around, a dawning horror on their faces. The arguing started immediately. Larry, Curly, and Mo, the 3 ringleaders, decided they could just force their way into other groups. They scooted their chairs over to nearby tables, trying to integrate. "Sorry," our teacher said, walking over, his voice calm but firm. "Those groups are already at the maximum size. 4 people per group." Larry, ever the charmer, tried to sweet-talk him. "Come on, Mr. Fighter Jet. Can't we just have a group of 5? What's the big deal?" The teacher saw the other students in the group wavering, feeling the pressure from Larry's presence. So he made a counteroffer, a diabolical one. "I'll let you join," he said, a glint in his eye. "But since there will be 5 of you, I expect to double the work. You'll have to do the project twice." Larry's jaw dropped. He tried to argue, but the teacher pointed to the rubric, to the clearly defined roles for each of the 4 group members. "If 4 people can do it once," he said, "then 5 people should have no problem doing it twice." It was a dick move, and he knew it. But it worked. The other kids, now armed with a reason to say no, voted him down. Larry was shut out. The other seniors, who had been trying the same move, were physically shooed away by the other groups. The rest of the class period was a symphony of dysfunction. The seniors argued. They yelled. They blamed each other. Eventually, they resigned themselves to their fate, forming 2 groups of pure, concentrated laziness. Our teacher, ever the professional, emailed Curly's parents and Mo's mommy. He informed them that their sons had chosen to work with each other. Curly's parents, believing their son to be a diligent worker, replied that they would make sure Curly wrote a group contract, confident he would do all the work and fire his lazy friends. Mo's mommy, however, immediately requested a meeting. Per school policy, he had 48 hours to respond to an email. He waited until hour 47. "I would love to meet," he wrote. "When are you available?" He then waited another 48 hours to schedule the meeting for the following week. In the meantime, other senior parents emailed, angry that he had let their kids work with the bad kids again. He calmly informed them that he hadn't expected all 7 of them to be absent on the same day. Suddenly, the seniors were in trouble at home for ditching. Their parents, defeated, told him, just try to help them pass. But Mo's mommy arrived for her meeting, ready for war. She demanded that he move Mo to a different group. "I decline," he said. The project has been going on for a week. It wouldn't be fair to the other groups. Then let him work by himself with an extension, she demanded. Gladly, he said, sliding a copy of the rubric across the table. Mo's face went white. He had no intention of doing any of the work. Then she accused him. You did this on purpose. You waited until senior ditch day to screw them over. That was a school-sanctioned event. I'm going to the board. Wrong move. A school-sanctioned event? The teacher asked, feigning confusion. That's interesting, because my attendance records show that your son was marked absent, and the absence was excused because his father called in. You see, all 7 of the seniors had hung out at Mo's house on ditch day. They had lied to her, told her the principal had given them the day off, and they had all called the school, pretending to be their own parents, to excuse their absence. This was a suspendable offense. Her anger instantly shifted from him to her son. She was caught, she could press the issue, but he now had her, and her son, dead to rights. He decided to show a little mercy, to really twist the knife. I had no idea it was senior ditch day, he lied smoothly. In fact, I tried to give your precious treasure a heads up. I sent an email to you and to him, the Friday before, letting you know that any absent students needed to form groups before Monday morning. I don't know why he didn't take my advice. She made Mo open his email. And there it was. His email. Unopened. He had won. She thanked him, her voice tight with fury, and dragged her son out of the room. Class morale was sky high. For everyone except the seniors. A week before the project was due, neither of their groups had even started. The HMS class average was steaming full speed ahead towards a massive, self-inflicted iceberg. The projects came in. It was no surprise. They were, without a doubt, some of the worst work he had ever seen. In one group, which included Mo and Curly, a text argument the weekend before it was due had ended with one poor kid being told, "You fucking do it." He did, and the result was a rushed, incoherent mess. Larry's group had produced a similar steaming pile. He graded their projects first. He knew the fallout would be immense. All 7 seniors dropped at least 1 letter grade. A couple of them dropped 2. This was 4 weeks before graduation. Larry, surprisingly, took his F- in stride. He was too calm. The teacher knew he was plotting something. Curly's parents and Mo's mommy, predictably, demanded meetings. Curly's parents were livid. Why did he get such a bad grade? They demanded. What they didn't know was that he had already met with the student who had done the entire project, and his parents. He had the full story. He had seen the text exchange. When he told Curly's parents, Curly refused to show them his phone. The teacher then pulled out a spreadsheet, a year's worth of group project scores, with the student names removed. He had highlighted Curly's scores. They were, consistently, among the worst in the class. The data was undeniable. It was a brutal, objective takedown. Curly, for the first time in his life, was confronted with the truth of his own laziness. He started to cry. His parents, their illusions shattered, kicked him out of the conference. "What can we do?" they asked, their anger replaced with a weary resignation. He offered tutoring. They agreed, but Curly never showed up. After 3 emails, his dad responded, "His mom and I have decided that he needs to learn to be an adult. We are leaving him to his own devices. Thank you for your efforts." The ripple effect was glorious. Curly, now grounded and stripped of his parents' support, started doing nothing in all of his classes. The other teachers, used to getting vehement, angry emails from his parents, now received the same resigned message. Curly still graduated, but his parents informed him they were no longer paying for college. It was time to get a job. Mo's mommy's meeting was more of the same. She tried every angle, every trick, to blame him. But she admitted that she knew Mo had been part of bullying the other kid in his group. She had tried to play him, and had outed herself. She too agreed to tutoring, but the scheming wasn't over. Mo's mommy started emailing him every few days. "Is my son doing his work? Did he get help?" Larry was still suspiciously chipper and had started popping into the after-school tutoring sessions with Mo, just to say hi. Our teacher smelled a rat. He knew Mo's mommy was nuts, so he made sure there was always another person in the room during his sessions with Mo. And then, the other shoe dropped. Mo's mommy was in the principal's office, demanding answers. Larry, it turned out, had been feeding her a steady stream of lies, convincing her that the teacher was emotionally abusing Mo after school, calling him a retard, and that she could even have the school check the cameras to see that Larry was there, a witness. The principal called a meeting.
Mo's mommy, Mo,
The principal, and our teacher. She laid out her accusations that he had singled her son out for abuse, that she wanted his grade raised. She had made a critical mistake. She had never actually talked to her own son about the alleged abuse. Mo, being lazy and dumb, had just gone along with it. The teacher looked at Mo. "Mo," he said, his voice calm, "please describe, in detail, what I have said to you during our sessions. I'll even leave the room so you can tell the principal without me here." "No," she said. "Stay. I want you to hear what you've done." What neither of them knew was that our teacher was a mentor teacher. His mentee, a young first-year teacher, had been in the room with him during every single tutoring session, working on her required contact hours. Ma, thinking she was just another student, hadn't even registered her presence. The principal already had a signed statement from her, detailing every interaction. Mo, when asked for specifics, couldn't provide any. He suddenly forgot what had been said. Mo's mommy was humiliated. She blamed the whole thing on Larry, furious that she had fallen for such a stupid, transparent ruse. The result was a school-wide email, cautioning teachers from being alone in a room with either Larry or Mo. Their after-school help from other teachers evaporated. Larry, his plan to get the teacher fired and skate by with a passing grade now in ashes, was suddenly very concerned about his grade. But it was too late. The other teachers, emboldened by our teacher's stand, were now holding all 7 of them accountable. One by one, they fell. The last few weeks of school were a frantic, desperate scramble. But they had done no real work for years. They didn't know how to apply themselves. They begged for extra credit, but he had the proof, the unopened online assignments, that they had never even tried. For the final exam, he made it an online, multiple-choice test, with the questions and answers randomized for each student. They couldn't cheat. Larry, who had spent a fortune on a tutor to try and carry his friends through the exam, was furious. His plan was ruined. He passed the exam, but his final grade was a meager D-. And the results? Of the 7 seniors, 1 didn't graduate. His parents had flown the entire family in for a graduation ceremony. He wasn't allowed to attend. 2 others lost their scholarships. They ended up as roommates, with 3 of the other seniors, including Mo, at their fallback school. And what of our 3 ringleaders? Larry's college rescinded his admission due to his final GPA. He had lied to his parents about it, and when he came home from a summer in Europe, expecting to go to college, he found they were selling the house. They kicked him out. The last anyone heard, he was telling people he had joined the military, but was discharged for a made-up illness. A different disease for every person he told. Curly's parents, after all that, paid for his college anyway. He was kicked out halfway through the first year for underage drinking. After a year of living at home, refusing to get a job, they kicked him to the curb. Last anyone heard, he was working in a vape shop. And Mo. He went to college and tried to pay other kids to do his work for him. When that failed, he faked his grades to keep his mom paying the bills. He was eventually kicked out. His mommy told her friends he had decided to become an entrepreneur, filming weddings with a drone. The reality, he was a distributor for a weed dealer and had started selling acid on the side. But there is one bright spot. One of the 7 seniors, after going to college with his friends, had an epiphany. He cut ties with them, buckled down, and graduated with honors in a lucrative field. He even emailed our teacher once to thank him for challenging him, for preparing him for the real world. In the end, it was never about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about teaching a lesson that went far beyond the classroom walls. A lesson about consequences, about effort, and about the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes The deepest hole you can ever fall into is the one you dig for yourself. And there you have it, a masterclass in poetic justice. What do you think? Was the teacher's plan a stroke of genius? Or did he go too far? Let us know in the comments below, and if you've ever witnessed a moment of truly satisfying revenge, we want to hear about it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, remember, the best victories are the ones you earn.